What if your entire neighborhood was part of a spy network, and no one ever knew it, not even the people inside it? In the early 1960s, Morocco was a crossroads of exile and empire. Tens of thousands of Jews lived between suspicion and survival, many dreaming of leaving, most terrified of being seen as traitors. Among them arrived a woman who didn't belong. She said she had returned from Marseille to rebuild her family's textile business. In truth, there was no factory, no family, and no Marseille. Her name was Leah Cohen, but her passport said otherwise. For weeks, she moved quietly through Casablanca's narrow lanes, slipping into community meetings, synagogue gatherings, and charity events. She memorized names, faces, habits. Every smile she gave, every coincidence she staged had been rehearsed. Her mission was simple on paper: connect the scattered Jewish communities, set up safe channels, prepare escape routes. But that wasn't the real assignment. The real task was invisible: build a network that could collect intelligence across North Africa without anyone realizing it existed. What Leah didn't know was that in Morocco, even charity had eyes. Every move she made was already being watched, by people who couldn't decide whether she was an idealist, a spy, or something worse. And every person she convinced to trust her unknowingly stepped into Israel's newest shadow empire. So, how do you convince a community to keep your secret when they don't know there is one? Leah arrived in Casablanca under the name Leah Cohen Ben Raphael, a daughter of merchants displaced during the riots. The papers looked legitimate, her accent less so. Her Hebrew carried traces of Haifa, her French too smooth for the alleys of the Mela. But in a city crowded with returning émigrés, no one asked too many questions. She rented a small storage unit near the port, filled it with bolts of bright fabric shipped from Marseille, real goods, paid with real money from a fake company. Her cover story was simple enough to be believed: a textile trader helping Jewish cooperatives rebuild. Behind the fabric were hidden compartments. Some carried coded reports written in stylized trade accounts. Others contained photographs of ports, ships, and oil convoys, materials she would hand off to visiting suppliers who were actually Mossad couriers. Her first test was trust. Casablanca's Jewish community was shrinking fast. Rumors swirled of secret ships that ferried families to Israel, of arrests, of disappearances. Anyone new drew attention. Leah needed someone inside, a respected name, someone whose belief could spread faster than suspicion. She found him in Rabbi Daniel Hayun, an elderly cleric managing relief funds for Jewish families trapped between emigration paperwork and police scrutiny. She offered bookkeeping help, brought supplies, fixed ledgers, and gently proposed a new system to distribute aid through her trade network. The rabbi hesitated. Too many people had offered help lately, but Leah's story was watertight. Shipment logs, supplier letters, donation receipts, all forged but verified through real phone calls routed by Mossad operatives in Paris. The deception worked because it was practical. It solved a real problem. Soon, aid money, letters, and consular requests began passing through her office. Each was copied, coded, and summarized before reaching Tel Aviv. The system looked like charity work. In reality, it was the birth of Operation Masquerade, a living web of informants disguised as a relief program. The first risk appeared quickly. During a shipment inspection, Moroccan customs officers found irregularities in her manifests. A mid-level officer named Captain Belkacem began asking questions. He was polite, even charming, which made him dangerous. He requested a meeting to clarify some export details. Leah rehearsed her answers all night. Hebrew accent muted, French softened, documents arranged. The next morning, she sat across from Belkacem in a sunlit government office. He examined her papers, asking seemingly trivial questions about her family and Essaouira, her suppliers, her lineage. Then he surprised her. He spoke fluent Hebrew. It was a test. She smiled, answered a blessing, deflected with modest words, and changed the subject to textile tariffs. He didn't insist, but his look lingered too long on the Hebrew newspaper folded in her bag. That night, Leah wrote her first uncertain report to Tel Aviv. Local authority interest increasing, cause unclear, recommend low activity for 2 weeks. Her handler approved the pause but reminded her, suspending operations too long would break their growing influence. The line between invisibility and irrelevance was razor thin. 2 weeks became 4. The community began wondering why Leah's shipments had slowed, why relief payments stalled. Rumors spread that she might be an agent of the French, collecting names for consular blacklists. Trust, once easy, now had to be rebuilt. To restore credibility, Leah made a bold move. She offered to personally escort a group of stranded families from Casablanca to Tangier to secure passage to France. The trip was risky. The police were cracking down on illegal immigration, but refusing would confirm suspicion. Her cover demanded visibility. Her safety required the opposite. On the road north, she realized how fragile her fabrication really was. One child asked about her family back in Essaouira. Another mentioned a cousin in Marseille who claimed never to have heard of a Cohen textile company. Each question forced her to invent faster, new names, new connections. Every answer tied her more tightly to a web of lies that could collapse with one wrong detail. At a roadside checkpoint, Belkacem appeared again. He recognized her immediately, smiled politely, examined her cargo, and allowed them to pass. She didn't breathe until the trucks reached Tangier. When they finally delivered the families to their contact, relief turned hollow. The encounter with Belkacem had proven her cover worked, but also that she was being tracked personally. Somewhere in Moroccan intelligence, someone knew her face, her business, her routes. Back in Casablanca, the rabbi greeted her with gratitude and trust. The community now saw her as an angel who risked her own life to help others. Donations poured in. Information flowed. The deception had stabilized, but new problems formed beneath the surface. The Port Authority demanded updated licenses. The textile business had to show real trade volume. Mossad's Paris office couldn't keep up with fake invoices fast enough. Money was real, but goods were imaginary. One contradiction discovered and everything would unravel. Leah began hiring real clerks to maintain the illusion. Young Jewish daughters from the community who saw her as a mentor. They typed letters, stamped papers, answered calls. None knew what they were part of. Every layer of additional reality made the falsehood harder to unwind. By the end of her first year, Leah had built a fully functioning business, a humanitarian reputation, and a reliable intelligence channel. But she also stood in a trap of her own design. Exiting would require erasing herself completely, burning friendships that had become real. One evening, as she closed her office, a letter appeared under her door, unsigned, handwritten in French. It said only one line: "I know who you are, and I will not betray you." There was no signature, no mark, no clue. Was it a warning or protection? And from whom? For almost a year, Leah's life settled into rhythm. Every dawn began with ledgers, coded shipments, and prayers whispered between lies. To the community, she had become indispensable. A trader who could smooth paperwork, arrange safe passage, move money without the police noticing. To Mossad, she was a node in an expanding network running from Casablanca to Marseille to Rome. But beneath the smooth surface, something subtle began to shift. Leah felt it first in greetings that grew hesitant, in the rabbi's pauses before endorsing her requests. A rumor moved through the Mellah. Someone in their circle was reporting Jewish immigrants to the Moroccan police. The rabbi denied it, but fear traveled faster than proof. Each time Leah touched a document, she could feel the invisible weight of questions she could never answer. She spent a night burning letters from Tel Aviv, watching the ink curl into unreadable dust. Trust, once her disguise, now felt like exposure. At a small dinner with her local aides, one young accountant, Rachel, laughed that Leah never spoke about her childhood. Leah smiled, invented a story about her father's spice shop and sandstorms near Essaouira. But halfway through, she stopped. Rachel's father had actually traded in Essaouira. The girl would know the geography. Leah corrected herself, saying the shop was near Marrakesh. The table went silent. The lie was tiny, but silence magnified it. That night, Leah wrote in her notebook, "Every truth adds risk. Every lie adds weight." 2 weeks later, the weight became unbearable. A courier from Tel Aviv arrived, a man named David Lavi, claiming to be a textile supplier from Lyon. He brought instructions. Headquarters wanted more detailed shipping logs and direct intelligence on Moroccan customs operations. That meant names, meetings, and possibly bribes. Leah resisted. Her entire success came from maintaining distance between commerce and espionage. If her operation became an obvious front, every worker, every clerk, every family she'd helped would be in danger. David reminded her that other networks in Egypt and Tunisia had already collapsed. Morocco is the last stable base, he said. Your cover gives us years of access. Use it fully or we lose it. Leah stared at him. If I push harder, I lose them, and I can't rebuild that trust again. He said quietly, then choose which loyalty you prefer, theirs or ours. When David left, she sealed her office door and didn't move for an hour. For the first time, she allowed herself to imagine aborting the operation, disappearing under her alias, vanishing into civilian life. She had built a perfect lie. Maybe she could live inside it. But she couldn't outrun one thing, Captain Belkacem. He appeared again, unannounced, outside the synagogue after prayers. He praised her community work, mentioned his own respect for Jewish families who keep their dignity. She answered cautiously. He then asked whether she still employed French couriers. It was an innocent question wrapped in a threat. That evening, she found her door half open. Nothing stolen, but papers disturbed, small enough to be unsettling, subtle enough to deny. She informed Tel Aviv, suggesting an immediate wind-down of activity in Casablanca. The response was brief. Maintain posture. Investigation common. Do not abort unless instructed. Her handler's confidence felt like indifference. They measured danger in reports and ciphers. She measured it in eyes watching from alleys. The next day, Rabbi Hayun visited her office. He carried a list of families requesting aid to leave the country. Leah promised to assist, out of habit more than conviction. He placed the list on her desk, hesitated, and asked, "Tell me truthfully, child, are we helping others or helping ourselves?" She froze. He didn't know, couldn't know, but his tone pierced something she kept buried. For a heartbeat, Leah wanted to confess everything, that every name she copied might end up as intel, and that every favor she granted was part of a wider map drawn in Tel Aviv. But her training returned. She smiled. "Rabbi, I came to serve, not profit." He nodded, yet his eyes stayed on her longer than before. When he left, he didn't bless her. That absence of blessing haunted her more than any interrogation could. The next shipment went wrong. Customs seized 3 crates marked as cotton samples. Inside were harmless textiles, but one contained a hidden compartment she hadn't authorized. A double lining stitched with microfilmed papers. Only 2 people had access, Rachel and David. Neither should have acted alone. Leah confronted Rachel, who swore she'd done nothing beyond routine checks. Rachel even seemed frightened by the idea that their work might be bigger than trade. The girl had started to sense something, but not enough to know the truth. Leah sent an encrypted cable demanding an explanation. The reply came days later. Independent insertion. Compartmentalized assets activated. You remain clean, clean. A single word that meant both protected and expendable. She realized headquarters no longer trusted her alone. Someone else was operating through her cover, using her company to move information she couldn't control. Her own fiction had been hijacked by invisible hands. Every success she built was now a trap waiting to expose her. That night, she didn't sleep. What if Belkacem found the hidden compartment? What if Rachel started asking why a textile trader needed coded ledgers? What if the rabbi already suspected? Each question sapped detail from her story, until even she no longer remembered which memories were real. 2 weeks later, she reached David through a public phone line in Tangier. He sounded rushed. He mentioned the Paris safe house monitoring her situation. She demanded extraction, immediate evacuation, falsified papers to France. He refused. "You're not exposed," he said. "They think you're being courted by the police, not hunted. That protects you." Leah almost laughed. "You call that protection? I'm one mistake away from prison." David lowered his voice. "Listen, things have changed. You're valuable again. Someone inside Moroccan intelligence is feeding us documents. We think it's Belkacem. Keep close to him, earn his trust. Don't abort." Belkacem, the man she feared most, now identified as a potential ally. The idea sounded absurd. If Tel Aviv was right, she was safe. If they were wrong, she was already dead. When she hung up, her hands trembled so badly she left fingerprints all over the receiver. Within days, Belkacem invited her to a dinner at his home, ostensibly to discuss trade permits. It was a small gathering. His wife, his brother from the Ministry of Interior, a cousin from the port. Every person at the table held authority. Leah smiled through every course, answered every casual question, and bled anxiety with every polite laugh. As the evening ended, Belkacem walked her to the gate. He said quietly, "You should be careful who loads your ships." She forced a neutral smile, but inside panic detonated. He knew about the seized crates. The phrase wasn't warning, it was confirmation. She reached home past midnight and began burning files, invoices, notes, even photographs of families she'd helped, all ash before dawn. But she couldn't bring herself to destroy one item, a letter from the rabbi thanking her for keeping our hope alive. That hope was now a liability. Each refugee she saved was another loose end that could lead back to her. Her escape options shrank. If she fled, she'd confirm guilt. If she stayed, she risked exposure from her own allies. For the first time, Leah sensed that her survival and the mission's success were pulling in opposite directions. In early spring of 1963, Tel Aviv sent a new message. Network stable. Belkacem channel confirmed. Continue integration. She reread the line 5 times. Belkacem channel confirmed. The phrase aligned too neatly with what she had feared, that Mossad had opened a line through Belkacem himself. But how? He wasn't sympathetic. He had never hinted at collaboration. Yet his every question, every warning now seemed reinterpreted as covert communication. Had she misread his intentions all along? To verify, she planted a simple test. Through the rabbi, she arranged a small cargo of flour for families relocating to Tangier. Inside the shipment manifest, she inserted a deliberate error, replacing a date code with a cipher phrase known only to Mossad handlers. If Belkacem intercepted it and reported nothing, he was just an investigator. If Mossad responded using that code, they were receiving information directly from him. The reply came 3 days later, through David's channel from Paris. Message received via established source, continue pattern. That single line shattered the architecture of her understanding. Belkacem had not been deceived, he'd been participating. All those near discoveries, those nervous interrogations, were they genuine suspicion or staged communication? If he worked for them, why keep her under stress? If he didn't, who was pretending to be him? Possibility layered on possibility until she couldn't tell whether she'd uncovered truth or another mask behind it. For the first time, she questioned the foundation of everything. Was she even the primary asset or simply the decoy cover shielding something larger? Had her own operation been built on a false premise from the start? She wanted to demand explanations, but there was no one she could call. Her handler changed codes weekly, and Paris had gone silent since the microfilm incident. Communication depended entirely on couriers she no longer trusted. The deception had grown beyond her grasp, autonomous, self-reinforcing, a shadow network that moved regardless of who understood it. One evening, desperate for clarity, Leah visited the rabbi again. He looked older, wearier. When she confessed her fear that she might be followed, he smiled sadly. "We are all followed here. The question is by whom?" She wanted to ask if he meant the police or something greater. He said only, "Sometimes the lie we tell to survive begins telling us what to do." She left before dawn, uncertain whether his words were advice or warning. The next morning, a dossier appeared on her office desk. No handwriting, no sender. Inside were copies of her own forged documents, every passport, signature, and business license she'd used to build her cover. And the last page bore a single note. "Stop before it consumes those who believe in you." There was no emblem, no threat, just handwriting that looked disturbingly familiar, almost her own. Had she written it in some moment she couldn't remember? Or had someone else learned to copy her too? Leah folded the letter slowly, locked it in her drawer, and sat facing the window as dawn broke over Casablanca. For the first time since arriving, she no longer knew which side she was truly working for. And somewhere beyond the city, unseen hands continued moving her shipments anyway. Leah stopped trusting written orders. Messages from Paris still arrived, but every instruction now sounded like a mirror of her own fears. One cable asked for increased proximity to local officer. Another, delay invisible charity to avoid attention. Contradictory advice, alternating weekly, as if different people were guiding the same operation toward opposite goals. So she decided to act on instinct. If Belkacem was part of the communication chain, she would confirm it in person. No intermediaries, no couriers. A simple conversation, that was her plan. She rehearsed for 3 nights, lines of dialogue, tone of voice, timing of pauses, when to hint, when to feign ignorance. She practiced answers aloud, bright and nonchalant, until even she couldn't tell when they sounded false. She invited Belkacem under the pretext of discussing charity permits. He accepted. Morning air smelled of sea salt and diesel. The meeting took place at her small office, and the one with bright bolts of fabric covering the cracked walls. He arrived in civilian clothes, polite, distant, completely unreadable. She poured tea. He declined sugar. "I heard you might be planning a larger export shipment," he said casually. She replied that she was considering it but needed clearances. Belkacem leaned forward, softer. "You worry too much. You help many people. That is known. No one wants to stop that." The words should have sounded harmless. Instead, they felt pre-written, rehearsed. She noticed his hand resting on a folded envelope. Mossad used similar stationery. Leah's heart kicked. The moment had come, yet she hesitated. If he truly was their channel, any sign of recognition could expose her as aware of his double role. If he wasn't, implying knowledge could destroy her entire cover. She said nothing. The silence stretched. Belkacem smiled faintly, placed the envelope on her desk, and left without instruction. Inside was a single printed export permit, legitimate, signed, stamped. Nothing else. She sat motionless for an hour, then burned the envelope. And the test had failed before it began. Her fear of choosing wrongly had preserved everything and revealed nothing. Weeks passed. The static equilibrium held. Activity resumed, but muted. She avoided direct shipments, relied on intermediaries, limited contact with the rabbi. Life looked ordinary. Then another courier appeared from Marseille. Not David this time, a young woman named Orna pretending to be an importer. She carried one message. Headquarters demanded an urgent transfer of the entire archive to Paris for consolidation. Archive meant everything. Ledgers, manifests, coded lists of families, even notes of her conversations. Leah refused immediately. Transporting them out will get everyone killed. Orna smiled politely. They already considered that. They said the risk here is higher. Leah bit back anger. The community survives because they believe these records protect them. If they vanish, everyone panics. Orna shrugged. Then tell them the truth you can afford to tell. There was no argument left. The decision was above her. But the moment Orna left, Leah made her own decision anyway. She would destroy the archives rather than send them. If Mossad wanted control, they could rebuild. She couldn't rebuild trust. She spent nights sorting papers, replacing real data with ornamental ledgers and fake donor lists written in beautiful script. Every real name she memorized before burning. Halfway through the process, she realized she could no longer distinguish which records were genuine. The operation had folded layers upon itself so many times that authenticity had dissolved. On the 7th night, she stopped. She didn't know whether she was protecting her people or defying her command. A false start came suddenly. She received word that a merchant ship bound for Marseille, carrying goods under her license, had been detained. Her first instinct, abort the operation completely, shut down the business, leave Morocco that same night. She packed the essentials and forged an exit visa. One clean escape, one last train. But on the way to the port, and she saw the detained ship still idle offshore, lights intact. No arrests, no police. Hey no, the detention had been an administrative delay. Routine inspection reported in newspapers that morning. She had almost vanished for nothing. Her entire life in Casablanca would have ended because of a clerical misunderstanding. That night, she unpacked and laughed without humor. The reflex to flee had nearly destroyed years of work. Every reaction was now contaminated by paranoia. For the first time, Leah began doubting her own instincts. Days later, Rachel returned from errands with a newspaper article underlined in red. Authorities praise efficient cooperation with local Jewish enterprises to safeguard trade routes. The accompanying photo showed Belkacem shaking hands with regional traders. Leah could see herself blurred in the background. Rachel thought it flattering. To Leah, it was exposure. Her own face, inside a national paper, printed proof that she existed. She considered immediate exile again, then stopped. Public visibility might actually shield her from suspicion, a false release. Anyone so openly recognized seemed less likely to be undercover. She leaned into that logic deliberately. She attended public charity events, accepted commendations, even gave interviews speaking about mutual prosperity and trust. Each public appearance brought temporary calm. The more visible she became, the safer she seemed. Or so she believed. It lasted 3 months. Then, one morning, the rabbi visited unannounced. His hands trembled as he placed a thin folder on her desk. Inside lay copies of her Marseille shipping documents, identical to Mossad versions, stamps matching their classification codes. Someone delivered these anonymously, he said. They warned they were being used to manipulate our community. Leah froze. The forgeries were perfect. Even she couldn't tell whether they were real or duplicated. She wanted to explain, but every possible sentence turned traitorous halfway out. If she denied their validity, he might show them to authorities. If she admitted knowledge, she confirmed guilt. He spoke first. All these families have trusted you. If this is deception, stop it while you still can. God forgives liars who save life, but not those who destroy faith. She said softly, I have not betrayed anyone. Which was true, in a way that made no difference. He left the file and walked away without turning back. That absence felt heavier than accusation. Leah hid the folder behind a false wall. When she returned an hour later, it was gone. She called Paris using coded phrasing in a textile order. No response. 2 weeks later, a telegram arrived. Activity compromised. Immediate suspension under review. No extraction instruction, no confirmation code. It could have been genuine or bait. She prepared to abort again. Fake identity documents, exit route through Spain, backup funds sewn into her coat. She even arranged for Rachel to manage the business in her temporary absence. But as she was about to leave, a messenger brought news. Captain Belkacem sought her urgently for paperwork verification. Instinct said run. Discipline said stay. She stayed. When she reached his office, he looked tired, almost sympathetic. He spoke without pretense. You're drawing too much attention. I convinced them to close the file, but you need to stop all shipments for a while. She stared at him. Who is them? He didn't answer, just signed a form confirming her trade clearance and slid it across the desk. On the way back, she felt an unusual calm, as if reprieved from execution. Maybe headquarters was right, maybe he was protecting her. And that calm lasted exactly 3 hours. By evening, her apartment door showed fresh pry marks. Inside, nothing missing, just a single photograph placed on her pillow, her own image from one of the charity events cropped to show her eyes only. The message was clear, safe for now, not free. The release she'd felt was artificial, a controlled illusion to keep her inside their line of sight. Her next move came from exhaustion, not courage. She decided to stage a partial withdrawal, reduce operations, send workers home, announce a sabbatical. Maybe it would blur her trace until the heat faded. She gathered her few trusted aides, including Rachel, and explained that she would travel to Europe for new supplies. Rachel protested. Everything runs because you're here. Leah smiled faintly. Then it's time to see if it can run without me. She left behind one thing, the key to the storage facility. It contained every remnant she hadn't burned. Ledgers, coded scraps, fragments of photographs. Rachel promised to guard it. 3 days later, a small explosion destroyed that very warehouse. Fire officials called it accidental. Newspaper reports mentioned electrical malfunction. Leah stood on a distant hill above the city and watched the smoke rise. She couldn't decide whether she felt grief or relief. Either Mossad had cleaned house, or the Moroccans had discovered her line, or both. Each possibility canceled the other, leaving only uncertainty. That night, she walked to the edge of the port, carrying her travel papers. The ship to Marseille waited. She hesitated at the ramp for a long time. Leaving now might appear like guilt, staying might look like defiance. She flipped a coin in her hand, not as decision-making, just movement to feel control returning it to her palm. At sunrise, she was still standing at the dock, ship gone, papers untouched. She resumed her routine in the following weeks with detached precision, visiting markets, balancing accounts, answering questions about delayed shipments. Outwardly, nothing had changed, but something internal had fractured. Every instruction she'd ever received now felt like a simulation. Perhaps there had never been a coherent chain of command. Perhaps she had been the illusion, the human echo keeping others invisible. Once, while checking receipts, she noticed a minor error in the date coding, one she would have caught instantly months ago. She stared at it for minutes, unable to fix it, realizing she no longer trusted her own patterns of thought. There was no external enemy to fight, no single point of failure to correct. The network's contradictions had grown inside her, mapping themselves into her mind until the mission lived independently of orders. She wrote one final message in code: operations self-sustaining. Recommend closure for my sector. Identity stable but corrupted beyond recovery. Whether anyone read it, she never knew. No answer arrived. Days turned to weeks. Then one morning, an envelope appeared beneath her door, the same type Belkacem had once left. Inside, only a single typed line. Continue appearing who you are. No signature, no seal, nothing else. Leah sat at her desk with the letter between her hands, the morning light washing across her papers, and realized she no longer knew whether the message came from Tel Aviv, from Belkacem, or from someone trying to keep the illusion alive. A lie that required stability needed believers. She was the last one left. And maybe that was the point all along. The fire at the warehouse did not end suspicion, it redistributed it. In the days that followed, police visited Jewish homes across Casablanca, asking cautious questions about donations, shipments, and charitable trade. No arrests, only presence. That was worse. Leah answered every inquiry calmly, providing valid receipts. Her explanations sounded so practiced that even when she told the truth, they felt invented. Belkacem summoned her once more for an official statement. He read from his notes without expression. The electrical fault originated with unpaid wiring maintenance. You weren't responsible. Then, after a pause, he said, "But you should travel soon. Too many rumors now. The safest cover is distance." She looked for tone in his words, concern, tactic, threat. None appeared. He was offering advice without claiming motive. That made it impossible to trust. She left his office more uncertain than before. Every safeguard she had built had turned circular. Community protecting her because she protected them. Police protecting her because they might be protecting themselves. And headquarters silent because silence was also control. That night, the rabbi's house was searched. When Leah visited, he sat amid torn pages and empty drawers, eyes dry. "They think someone uses our names," he said. "Not to escape anymore, but to send things out of the country. Things not prayers." She started to speak but stopped. Anything she said could sound like confirmation. The distance between confession and self-incrimination had vanished. Over the next week, families stopped approaching her for aid. The office stayed open but empty. Rachel vanished without farewell. Her apartment was locked, her belongings gone. Leah suspected Mossad extracted her silently to remove evidence, or Moroccan intelligence recruited her. Both possibilities felt equally plausible. The community fractured quietly. Aid committees dissolved, donations declined, synagogue attendance thinned. Everyone had begun auditing one another's intentions, repeating the same whispered phrase, "Who are they really working for?" This fragmentation was the unintended legacy of her precision. The tighter she had woven the system, the more violently it unraveled once a single link burned. A network designed to move secrets became an engine of mistrust. Leah tried to stabilize it. She donated food publicly, reopened textile orders, invited local press to see her honest business. The visibility that once protected her now attracted resentment. Merchants muttered that she had connections too high to question. Others claimed she paid off officers. One night, walking home, she noticed her footsteps echo on empty streets, one too many echoes keeping pace. When she turned, the street was still. Every sound felt staged to test her nerves. Yet she kept the routine alive, understanding too late that appearance had replaced authenticity. Her cover had become not a disguise, but her only remaining identity. In Tel Aviv, analysts treated Morocco as stabilized. Reports credited a community network that continued functioning even after communication outages. They assumed Leah, referred to as Asset M32, had successfully delegated leadership. No one realized the network now operated without ideology or coordination. Merchants used its trade lines for profit. Families used its logistics for migration trafficking. Political factions infiltrated remnants of the structure to spy on each other. Within 2 years, intelligence gathered from these channels became contradictory. Some reports described non-existent arms deals, others identified undercover agents who'd never entered Morocco. By the time headquarters investigated, falsified intelligence had already influenced diplomatic policy. Mossad analysts debated shutting the network down, but closing it meant revealing the extent of reliance. Silence became institutional inertia. A cover story had morphed into infrastructure, too valuable to erase, too corrupted to trust. Every secret she once carried now generated noise rather than clarity. The organization survived by convincing itself that someone understood the chaos. In reality, no one did. Leah's request for exfiltration went unanswered for 8 months. By then, she had shed her former routines completely. She stopped checking for mail drops or signal markings. She didn't know which ones were genuine anymore. A new identity reached her through a visiting trader, French residency papers in the name Claire Haddad. No instructions accompanied them, no ticket, no rendezvous, only an alternate passport. Was it a lifeline or bait to draw her into confession? She waited weeks before using it. When she finally left Casablanca, the departure felt neither escape nor liberation, just absence. In Marseille, the streets spoke Arabic and French like home, but strangers' voices cut through her memories at odd angles. She opened a small textile stall under her new name. Business was ordinary, money stable. Yet each customer who mentioned Morocco sounded like code. Every familiar accent triggered panic. She dreamt of fire often. Warehouses burning, ledgers curling, hands reaching through smoke asking for reasons. Sometimes she answered. Sometimes she didn't. She began writing letters no one would receive, reports without addresses, observations without handlers. Month after month, she filled notebooks with data that had ceased being meaningful. Ship schedules, gossip, price fluctuations. The discipline of documentation was her only proof she still existed. In 1971, years after her last real contact, a stranger approached the stall, a middle-aged man claiming to be from Tel Aviv. He said he'd been asked to check on former field assets. Leah didn't confirm anything. He spoke briefly, awkwardly, about how her documentation had proven durable and that the service continued to benefit from her foundation. The phrasing chilled her. Her life, her years of tension and secrecy, were now summarized as durable documentation. He thanked her on behalf of departments that didn't remember her name, then disappeared into a taxi before she could ask questions. That night, she poured every letter she'd written into the sink and lit a match. The smoke rose slowly, smelling of ink and linen. For the first time, there was silence afterward. Not relief, only quiet. The Moroccan network outlasted its creators. Throughout the 1970s and 1980s, Mossad operatives continued to receive intelligence from trusted sources in North Africa, unaware that many reports traced back to merchants trafficking for rival services. A deception designed to outsmart enemies had eventually begun deceiving its own originators. Periodic internal audits found inconsistencies, dead agents filing expenses, coded signals appearing years after their senders had retired. Each anomaly was buried as classification overlap. The bureaucracy preferred false continuity to admitting systemic loss. Somewhere in headquarters archives, Leah's reports were still used as templates for field operations. Her handwriting became standardized example material, anonymous training relic, detached from its living author. When younger officers asked about the woman behind the templates, no single supervisor knew. The story blurred between myth and paperwork, a convenient symbol of long-range endurance. No one ever asked whether that endurance had become blindness. Years later, Leah learned through community gossip that Rabbi Hayun died under house arrest. The charge was never specified. His last known statement had been simple: "Faith dies quietly, between friends," and she folded the newspaper and filed it among blank pages. She'd run out of ways to measure guilt. What counted as betrayal when every intention was mixed with necessity? By then, the Mossad network in Morocco had fused with civilian trade so thoroughly that dismantling it would collapse legitimate markets. Governments changed, currencies shifted, informants aged into businessmen. The architecture stood, but its purpose dissolved. That endurance looked like success on maps. But inside its history, every outcome traced back to Leah's first lie, the one that multiplied until even its architects couldn't find the boundaries. When interviewed by a local journalist decades later, she spoke softly. "Sometimes the largest truth is that nobody remembers the lie that built it." The quote ran in small print beneath a story about post-war migration. No one noticed it. The journalist never realized who she was. Before Morocco's operation was officially archived, a mid-level analyst attempted to reconcile conflicting data. He discovered 2 active networks reporting identical intelligence with different origins. Both referenced Leah's original channels. He concluded one must be imposters, probably criminal syndicates. His report was ignored. Budget allocations required acknowledging success, not internal confusion. The oversight sealed permanent distortion into official records. What began as covert precision ended as bureaucratic illusion, a deception system feeding its own mythology. Somewhere inside those files, cross-referenced among logistics codes and shipping archives, existed the last cable Leah ever sent. The one that said identity stable but corrupted beyond recovery. The analysts misread it as routine notation for supply degradation. Her warning had become data noise. Leah, still Claire to everyone around her, grew old in quiet rhythm. She paid taxes, traded cloth, attended synagogue rarely. When asked about her life, she smiled like someone guarding nothing worth stealing. She never contacted Tel Aviv again. The service never came looking. Sometimes, walking through Marseille's port, she watched the ships leaving for North Africa. The gulls circled, the sails leaned, and she would think, not of nations or causes, but of how many ordinary lives had unknowingly carried the weight of invisible wars. The intelligence network still existed then, outliving the lies that birthed it. Each shipment, each handshake, each disguised trade route whispered a truth her own life had already proved. That once deception takes root in human trust, it no longer needs agents to survive. She folded her coat tighter against the wind and walked inland, away from the ships, away from what she'd built. There was nothing left to expose and no one left to convince. If the truth ever mattered, it hadn't been lost, it had simply become unrecognizable. And that, perhaps, is how such stories end, not with revelation but with endurance mistaken for success.